We rabbis all agreed that we would speak from the center, and ordinarily I'd be delighted to. We don't have a little podium. We don't know where it is. And this has a better incline, so I know I'm off center, but I can do this a little better over here. Some months ago, when I announced my decision to retire next year, I was told by our officers, by our trustees, and by Bruce Stein that in celebration of my final year as the senior rabbi of Congregation Beth Yeshurun, that this would be a year of many surprises and special moments. Really, Bruce, a nice watch would have sufficed. But all of this has happened, and all that has happened has truly left me speechless. And yes, this has been an amazing surprise that we have found this place, that we are standing in Lakewood Church thanks to its extraordinary generosity and the warm welcome that Pastor Osteen has given us. But grateful as we all are to be here today, and me most of all, grateful as we are for the heartfelt and loving invitation which was extended to us. Honestly, I would be happier if I was standing on the bima of little Congregation Beth Yeshurun, 4525 Beechnut Street, in our own shul, in our own beloved spiritual home, the place where we have shared so many simchas, so many b'nai mitzvah, so many weddings, so many services. Yes, that's where I would be if I could have my most fervent wish come true. We are a congregation that has found itself individually and as a community turned upside down. Some 3.5 weeks ago, hundreds of our homes and businesses flooded, and many of us joined the crummiest club in the world for the first time, the Flood Victims Club. But the truth is, even if you didn't flood, you were still impacted by Hurricane Harvey. Even if your home stayed dry, many of your workplaces didn't. And you've had to support and encourage your neighbors and your friends and family who lost everything, even if you didn't. How many of you have written and told me that you didn't flood, but your parents' home flooded, or your children's? And it's been weighing on you, this so-called survivor's guilt, and you just can't go on as if nothing happened when you're in a family or in a neighborhood or on a street where so many others did. So many have said to me, "I'm so depressed, Rabbi. I can't go back into my beautiful house when nothing's left but the beams and foundation. I'm so tired of packing up what we saved and throwing out what we lost. I can't handle another day of looking at whole streets, whole neighborhoods where every lawn is filled with someone else's stuff." And that's why I'm so glad that you're here today. Because I want to tell you not to feel lost, not to dread what lies ahead, but to take this horrific community event and find some light with which we can, I am confident, move forward. I've been thinking about this ever since my own home flooded, and I was sitting on my stairs watching the water lap across my dining room and den. Soda cans floating like those bottles thrown in the ocean that eventually make it to shore somewhere. As the water started to recede and the house became filled a few days later with mold remediators and family and great friends to help, I found myself thinking, as hard and cruel as this is, there are actually rays of sunshine, lessons we can learn. Today, as we start a new year, I want to share with you what this horrible experience has taught me and what I hope it can teach all of us as well. I think the first thing it has taught me is just how resilient we can be when we are confronted with enormous challenges. I deal with emergencies every day, every week as a rabbi of a large congregation. But when I sat on the first unflooded step of my stairs on the day our home flooded, I felt more overwhelmed than I have ever felt, I think, in my life. I was besieged with questions racing through my head, and I felt a helplessness that was new to me. Where does one begin when almost everything you own is immersed in water, floating? I did what any rational person would do. I waded into the water and began picking up cans of Diet Coke and Dr. Pepper that were bobbing all around. And Marcy turned to me and she said, "With all that's flooded, what are you doing chasing down cans of soda?" And I answered her, "I can't just sit here. I have to do something. I can't pick up a sofa. I can't pick up the refrigerator. At least I can pick up cans of Dr. Pepper." When you really can't do anything, you try at least to do something. But you don't have to be challenged by a flood to feel that sense of being overcome, unable to breathe, not sure how to go on. I've seen it on the faces of so many of you who've lost your spouses after 50 or 60 years or earlier. So many years of sharing everything, of making history together, one decade after another. Then one of them dies and the other is alone and wondering how it's possible to live without the presence of the other person. They truly feel, you have told me, you truly feel like you have been cast adrift. I've heard this painful cry seep from the hearts of men and women of all ages who thought they were in a beautiful marriage only to find themselves now cast off by the one they loved and the one they thought loved them. In one moment, a woman once said to me, "I was in a marriage with my bashert in a beautiful home where we raised our children and had so many dreams. And in the next moment, I was on my own in a one-bedroom studio looking for a job with a skill set that hadn't been tested for years." She felt like she was drowning, that she was trying to swim to safety, but didn't know which direction to go. I've seen people come to me with dark eyes from crying as they've struggled to save a relative or a friend with a chronic, lingering disease. And he's sinking deeper and deeper with each passing week, each passing day. How do you get past the pain of caring for someone who is slowly drifting away? And you know that soon you will be all alone. Where do we get the strength to go on? Amazingly, somehow we do. No matter how much we are tested, how far we are pushed emotionally and physically, God has somehow planted within each of us an extraordinary, almost superhuman resilience, that drive, that something inside us that keeps us going and pushes back whenever we feel the urge to give up. Indeed, it's our miraculous resilience that reinforces my faith. Because how else could we have this inside us? Where else could it come from except our divine Creator? He not only has given us an unquenchable thirst to survive, He has given us an unquenchable thirst to transcend our own notions of what we are capable of doing. A few days after Harvey, I spoke with a woman in our congregation whose home was flooded. She was sobbing as we spoke. "We're leaving this house," she said, "and never coming back. We're too old to deal with this. This is too much for us. We're done. We don't have the strength." But when I saw her at services less than 2 weeks later, she told me that she and her husband are staying, that they're going to rebuild. That house, she said, wasn't just the furniture and the appliances in it, she said. It was where 40 years of memories had been made. It was where their kids had been raised, where she and her husband had made a life with and for each other. "We've decided we're not going to walk away just because a lot of stuff got wet," she said, almost defiantly. "We're staying." She found that resilience inside her. It came through for her and her husband. Whenever life seems to be in the path of a giant wave, when we face obstacles in our lives that stun us and try to beat us down, Let us remember that we are part of a people that for countless centuries has endured far worse than flooded homes. We come from a people that has had to restart itself so many times in so many different lands that we came to be known as the wandering Jews. Yet we are still here because our ancestors remained defiant, remained strong, determined, unstoppable, unwavering, strong-minded, steady, dogged. God, it seems, made us that way. And now whenever we ask ourselves what will become of us, whenever we question our ability to go on, whenever we feel so tired, we can look around and be emboldened by all the people sitting around us who have similarly faced challenges in their lives, not just when their homes flooded, but in so many other ways, and still emerged stronger than before. From hundreds of people here today who have built and rebuilt before, from people here today whose lives have been turned upside down because of a death in their family or a painful divorce, we can learn how to rebuild our lives and keep living and to renew our lives, to embrace the hopeful futures that lie ahead. That's the first thing I learned from what happened on August 27th. I learned a second thing too, and it was when I had to decide what to save and what to let go when the water started flowing into our house. When Marcy went downstairs on that fateful Sunday morning, the inside of our house was still dry. But as I was walking around downstairs, feeling good that once again we had not flooded, she called me from the kitchen that there appeared to be a leak in our dishwasher. And I remember calling back to her and saying, what a terrible time for the dishwasher to break. But it wasn't the dishwasher. Slowly but surely, another trickle came in and then another. Next thing I knew, I was standing in little trickles of water. One came from under the door, one came from under the floor, one came from the walls. I didn't know we had so many ways for water to get in. And it was then that I began thinking about all the conversations I've had with people over the years in our congregation whose homes had flooded, and who had told me how they had to decide so quickly what to grab first, what was most valuable, what things were really irreplaceable. On the day we flooded, I stood there for what seemed like an eternity, not knowing which way to turn. And so I began filling my arms with family albums, our wedding book, our University of Texas and high school yearbooks, all kinds of stuff that had no monetary value, but were in the end the only things I knew I couldn't replace. But when we had grabbed all we had time to carry, and Marcy and I fled upstairs before the rising water blocked our path, I had something of an epiphany when I suddenly realized that the only thing in our house that was truly irreplaceable to me was the woman sitting next to me, my Marcy. We were safe. We were together. And nothing in the world was more important than knowing that she was there. And suddenly I found myself asking why, if I really felt that way and always had, why I hadn't always shown it. I thought of all the Sundays I've missed going places with her, all the times she's waited up for me when I've been at meetings or visiting a home, all the ways in which my actions and my absences have not shown her how I truly feel about her, this person who's the most precious person in my life. I remember some years ago having a very quick conversation with a woman who was in our congregation as I walked around with a Torah scroll. Most people just say Shabbat Shalom, but this woman said to me when I asked how her husband was, she said, my husband's a very conscientious doctor and I know he loves me more than life itself. But honestly, she said, I don't think he's ever chosen me over a patient. That response really stung me. How many physicians, how many attorneys, how many congregational officers, how many business people, how many teachers, how many rabbis are willing to go anywhere and do anything, even if it means denying their spouses and their children the quality time they deserve. I remember years ago, Marcy complained about my readiness to meet anyone, anytime, even when we had young kids who needed me. On one Sunday afternoon, we were with the kids in a local park, and I received a call from a congregant who said he needed to see me right away. It was urgent. And I turned to Marcy and said that something important had come up and I needed to run to the synagogue. Our kids weren't happy. Marcy wasn't happy. How important was it really? So I called the member back and I asked him a question. I said, I know you didn't call me about a medical emergency, but if what you need to talk to me about could be quantified as a medical event, is it so urgent that you would call 911 right now? Or would it be something you could wait until morning to see your doctor? And the man said, oh, it could wait. It's important, but it's not an emergency. I stayed with my kids, and I saw this member the next day. Our spouses, our children are so precious to us, our parents, our brothers and sisters, our grandchildren. We know they are, and we know we would do anything to protect them because they mean so much to us. But too often, we are all guilty, I suspect, of putting other things ahead of them. I've told this story before, so please forgive me if you've heard it, but it left such an indelible mark on me that years later, I can't forget it. After a long meeting in the synagogue one night, a congregant was leaving and happened to notice that the light was on in my study. Sticking his head into my office, he asked, boy, you're really working late. What are you working on? And I explained to him, I'm working on my desk. It's all piled with correspondence, papers, mail. I have to clean it up or I'll start tomorrow on the wrong foot. So let me ask you something, our congregant said. If you don't clean your desk tonight, will your sermon not be ready next Shabbat morning? No, it'll be ready. And will you not be able to visit sick congregants at the hospitals this week? Sure, I'll see them. And will you not be able to teach your classes, go into the schools later in the week? No, I'll do it. So really, he said, if you stay late tonight, the only thing you won't be able to do is to be home tonight with your wife. He was right. We sometimes have enormous appetites for work, to finish up a project or task, to make one more phone call, to answer that last wave of emails, to follow up on one more lead. But in the end, what is the price we pay for this inability to say enough? The only things we end up sacrificing are the things that in the end we know matter the most. Time with our family, time at peace with ourselves and those we love. The very people that if we were in a house and the water was rising, we would rush to save first because they are the most important things, people in our life. On the morning of August 27, that lesson came crashing down on me. I've always known what's most important to me, and really, don't we all? But with my wife sitting alongside me upstairs and our children on the phone, I resolved to not only never forget it, but to more frequently show it. It was a lesson I learned while trying to decide what to rescue from the water, and rediscovered what in the end was truly important and what was not that important at all. And finally, in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, I found myself deeply moved by the kindness of strangers and discovered anew the truth in Judaism's belief that God created a world that is inherently good, that we are born not inclined to do evil, but to love thy neighbor as thyself. I've had many conversations over the years with members of our congregation who have told me they believe that most people in the world are selfish and deep down don't really care about other people. How else to explain behavior like I heard from a Beth Yeshurun family, which 3 weeks ago found itself in shoulder-high water as it sought to make its way to safe ground? As they passed a house where a woman was standing safely on her porch, they looked to her and were shocked to be told something to the effect of, "Don't come to me for help. I'm too busy with my own problems." At moments like that, it's easy to lose faith in humanity. When people become vehicles for the distribution of hate, when people kill innocents in the name of religion, when people seem to be insensitive to the pain and the needs of others, one is forced to question the Jewish belief that we are all God's children. We ask if God could really have created people like them. And yet, in the grand scheme of things, the number of people who are truly evil, truly uncaring, is such a minuscule percentage when compared to all the billions of men and women who do not kill, who do not cause harm to others, but reach out to help strangers and who believe in their hearts in a loving God, who created us to help our hurting human beings, whose blood is just as red as ours. Yes, it may seem sometimes that there are a lot of selfish people in the world, but when you encounter people, when your house and your synagogue flood, that can make you ask a different kind of question. It becomes clear. Who are all these people who come out of nowhere, out of the woodwork, with an insatiable desire to help us when our strength is gone and our spirits may start to sag, and to ask nothing for their labors except the joy of giving of themselves? In the days after Beth Yeshurun flooded so grievously, our synagogue was so filled with hundreds and hundreds of people, you could barely move. These were many times members of our congregation who rushed to help. But there were also hundreds of people who weren't Jewish, who came to a place whose very name they couldn't pronounce. Many of you who flooded this year or in years past know what I'm talking about. You were standing in your devastated home, everything wet and dirty, and made unbelievably heavy by all the soaked up water. And then suddenly there was a group of smiling people sent by Jewish Family Service, by Beth Yeshurun, Chabad, Mormons, Christians, Muslims, Jews standing at your door, and moments later in your living room. Honestly, when I saw this happening in my own home or in our beloved synagogue, it vanquished any doubts I might have about the inherent goodness of people. I've never been more inspired by what I saw in those early days after Harvey. It's not just floods that bring out the best in people. How about friends who sit with us when we're hospitalized, or take us to get chemo when we're sick, or who offer to pick up and watch our children when we have vital things we have to take care of? How about the wonderful people who show up at Shiva houses and go around straightening up, collecting plates, washing dishes so we're not left with a huge mess when everyone leaves? Who are these people who pop into our lives when we really need them, who allow us to tap into their strength when our own is gone? They're like the electrical extension cords I remember seeing in my neighborhood when Hurricane Ike left our streets without electricity. Actually, half the streets. On one side were all the houses with no power, and on the other side of the very street were homes that still had theirs. The ones who still had power ran extension cords across the street to the homes on the other side, and so doing brought light to those homes who were empty of it. That's what these people do for us when we need them. Angels, it has been said, walk among us. On earth, we call them friends. A friend of mine who lives in Florida needed to nail shut the windows of his house as Hurricane Irma approached. Unable to reach the windows on the third floor, he was shocked when a stranger walked up to his house with an extension ladder, raced his way all the way to the top, nailed the shutters down, then came down and then ran off to help somebody else. And my friend wrote, "Where is God? God is within each of us as we go out and help our neighbor, as we give to those in need, and as we try to make a world where we can always recognize the humanity in each of God's creatures." Almost everyone I've spoken to has a story about someone or some group of people that just showed up to help us. And how good it felt knowing we were not alone, that there were so many people who cared and wanted to lift some of our load. I'm thinking of the wonderful friend who, when both our cars were flooded, drove us through Houston's still half-flooded streets to rescue my mother, who was stranded downtown. Or another beautiful human being who spent hours with us as we sought to find a car we could rent. There were a few others looking for cars at that time as well. One of the great beliefs of too many in modern society is that we can do everything we need by ourselves. But Hurricane Harvey showed us otherwise. When our phones couldn't stay connected, when we lost our electricity and our contact with the outside world, when we were suddenly powerless and had no internet, we needed help. We needed someone else to care about us, to give us aid and comfort. And so many of us found that in the kindness of strangers. If we needed to have our faith in other human beings restored, these last few weeks were made to order. As we lost our homes, we gained new respect and appreciation for the angels who came into our lives when we truly needed them. I once heard a wonderful story about the dark days of a labor camp in the Ukraine during the years of the Holocaust. The soldiers had decided to have fun with their Jews. In the middle of a field were two large pits, and one of the guards said to the Jews, "Each of you will have an opportunity to save your miserable life. All you have to do is jump over the pits." It was clear to the inmates that it was impossible to jump over the pits. But among the thousands of Jews there was Rabbi Israel Spira, and he was standing with a frail 16-year-old boy. Rabbi said, "The boy, it's hopeless. Let's just sit down and wait for the bullets to end our wretched existence." But Rabbi Spira objected. "God," he said, "created us with extraordinary powers and strength. Yes, we may jump and fail, but we must jump. We must jump." As they reached the pit, the rabbi closed his eyes and commanded in a powerful whisper, "Let us jump." And when the rabbi and the young boy opened their eyes, they found themselves miraculously on the other side of the pit. "Rabbi, we're here, we're alive," the young boy shouted. "Tell me, Rabbi, how did we do it?" Said Rabbi Spira, "Well, I was holding on to my heritage and my faith and everything precious in my life, and I found strength I never knew I had. But tell me, sweet child, how did you reach the other side of the pit?" And the young boy replied, "It was easy, Rabbi. I was holding on to you." My friends, no matter what life puts before us, no matter how great the challenges, no matter how dark our night and how deep the pits we have to cross, no matter how scary the unknown, let us hold on to our faith. Let us hold on to those we know and the strangers whose extended arms we grab in the darkness. Let us thank God for enriching our souls with the strength to hold on, and let us hold on to each other. And so doing, we will survive the floods. We will survive all the challenges that life throws our way. And with hope in our hearts, in this new year, we will transcend troubled waters wherever they emerge, and we will live to know great joy, thanks to all the blessings, all the angels, within and around us. And to this let us say, Amen.